The next book on my backlogged book review list is this one. It's called Mephistopheles by Jeffrey Burton Russell. And it's called Mephistopheles, the Devil in the Modern World. This is one of a multi-volume set. I think he's written 5 books. Jeffrey Burton Russell has on the history of Lucifer, Satan, the devil, whatever you want to call him, in the Western world. Ever since, pre-Christian times to the present. And it says in the body of the review, I forget, this is either number 3 or 4, but I'll let you know. To be honest with you, I hadn't read any of the previous 3, so this must be number 4, of Jeffrey Burton Russell's books, which together comprise a history of the devil from antiquity through the 20th century. I started at the end because the only other volume I own, which is the 3rd volume in the series, is packed away in a box somewhere, and it didn't have the chance to catch my eye like this book did. The reason why series like this attract me so much is beyond me. Maybe I'm just drawn to really big, unwieldy reading projects. However, judging from the last volume alone, it seems to be a pretty superficial treatment of the subject at hand, with little to offer someone who's already got some knowledge of the history of religious ideas. This volume picks up with the beginning of the Reformation, whose emphasis on sola fide revitalized sola fide by faith alone, as opposed to works, which the Catholics emphasize. This Protestant emphasis on sola fide, revitalized older medieval ideas of diabology, which is the word Russell uses for the study of Satan or the devil. There's some interesting and scary fragments of Martin Luther's life in this book that are retold, including the tidbit that one of his most important biographers, Heiko Obermann, described Luther's whole existence as a war with Satan. I would be sort of sad if one of my biographers chose to sum up my life in those 3 words. He also uses this section of the book to look at the diabology of John Calvin and the 16th century mystic contemplatives, St. John of the Cross and Teresa of Avila. With the appearance of the Enlightenment, as the book goes on, it is written in chronological order. With the appearance of the Enlightenment, you have increasing popularity of ideas like empiricism, rationalism, the use of the scientific method. People started to take diabology, or at least the possible existence of the devil, much less seriously, which is hardly a surprise of advancing scientific culture. In this section of the book, chapter 3, the reader gets a plodding 30-page exegesis on Milton's Paradise Lost, which, while it is a poem largely about the devil, seems to consist of too much summary and too much ham-handed literary analysis. Its appearance is abrupt, you don't really see it coming, and completely out of place in an otherwise smooth, and at least up until this point, smoothly flowing history of ideas. You get a history of ideas, and then you just get this, plump, 30-page essay on the character of Satan in Milton. Very random. When Russell begins to talk about the Enlightenment and some of its most prominent thinkers, he weirdly and biliously starts tossing around pejoratives like propagandist. He doesn't seem to accept and I just spelled that incorrectly. He doesn't seem to accept the modern biological consensus position on evolution, for example, stating, quote, "New reflections on randomness and time suggest that even in billions of years, the information of intelligent life by random processes is virtually impossible," end quote, though he intelligently stopped short of trying to argue that a supernaturally intelligent being is responsible for the diversity of life on Earth. He has a particular, especially his argument against miracles, which Russell endlessly
I think for probably more than 30 pages in attempts to rebut, but I think fails in that attempt. He hilariously claims that the Marquis de Sade is the logical conclusion of atheism, which I thought was a really interesting admission concerning an author whose work, perhaps more than any other in the 18th century, confirms the existence of evil in the world, not a refutation thereof. And he reads de Sade as this sort of inveterate misanthrope and sexual deviant, which is much too easy a way to read him, I think, instead of, I'm going to steal Richard Rorty's word here for a second, instead of as an ironist, who is actually trying to make cogent points about the very real existence of good and evil in society, except he does it by subverting the way that you would usually do it, instead of sermonizing about the way it should be done. None of this bodes well for his reading of Goethe's Faust, just as plodding, just as long, and just as unnecessary as his reading of Milton, and just as uninteresting, if that wasn't an adjective I already used. The overall tone of the book comes across as a latter-day apology for religious ideas which don't really jibe with modernity, which probably explains his hostility to several facets of modernity. Russell's obvious trouble reconciling himself to commonly accepted scientific positions like evolution, the long, meandering renditions of literary works, of which I only mentioned two, but there are several more of less important writers, enjoy, and his obvious disdain for the Enlightenment make for a perfect storm which makes this book both sad and funny to read. Not funny in the good way, though, unfortunately. Russell's specialization is the medieval time period, so maybe I just caught him trying to tie up loose ends in a historical period with which he has little familiarity. I hope that's the case. That can be forgiven to a certain extent. As soon as the third volume finds its way out of a box and onto one of my bookshelves, I might pick it up and let you guys know. Mephistopheles, The Devil in the Modern World, by Jeffrey Burton Russell.